Hi everybody and welcome to BBC. A number of the Sangha, the monastic community, just returned from the 18th annual monastic gathering of Western Sangha at Deer Park Monastery in Escondido. And I've been continuing to sit with the theme of this year's gathering, which was how to develop and sustain a Bodhi resolve joyfully in challenging times. And I indeed want to admit to myself that this is indeed very challenging times. When we hear about the hunger, when we hear about the economic inequity, when we hear about the warring sides everywhere we turn, the environmental challenges, crisis even, as Bhikkhu Bodhi said, it's hard not to fall into personal distress or cynicism or despair or hopelessness. And so I wanted to share sort of what do we want to commit to, and how do we really engage our lives in a way that addresses these concerns, that will be of benefit and that will support the world in a very profound way, either in small ways or big ways. They're both very, very much interrelated to one another. And how to use our Dharma practice to be able to help us to move into these challenging times with joy, to grow our bodhicitta. And as I was thinking about this, what I remembered was back in 2007, at the request of the local environmental activist community here in Idaho and in northeastern Washington, they had made a very specific request to Shravasti Abbey that we would do a retreat on how to deal with our minds, how to deal with our body, speech, and minds during these increasing challenging times. What kind of heartfelt tools can we use? What type of mind training, thought training do we need to cultivate in order to be able to be of benefit and to serve? And the retreat was called Activism with Altruism. It was a week long, and I recovered the weekend long, about Friday night to Sunday afternoon, I believe. We had people that were Dharma practitioners that we knew, people who were not Buddhist, people who were curious about the Dharma, but all were very heartfelt in their wanting to have tools, wanting to engage. And so I found some transcripts from this retreat. And I wanted to spend the next few times here over the next few weeks kind of sharing some of the high points that I'm kind of taking in and revisiting and sort of helping me to grow my Bodhi resolve with joy in challenging times, because I'm having somewhat of anxiety and trepidation growing within this week coming, and I want to be able to hold myself with an open heart no matter what happens. So the main point that I want to start today is what Venerable started the retreat with, which is the way that she starts all retreats, is that she talks about motivation. And the way that she started off the retreat is that she said, many of us start the day, even before we get out of bed, is figuring out what we're going to do. Okay, so, and I know for a fact that that's my personal experience. As soon as I open my eyes, okay, practice this morning, a first cup of tea, morning session, breakfast, okay, then today. And my list starts going. What does Semke have to do today to support the Abbey, to support her practice? And this is even before, at least my experience is even before I get out of bed. And so what she says is, but you see, what we have to do is not the most important thing for the day. Not the list, the calls, the work, the family. The most important thing we have to do is not to harm anyone. Because if we don't have that foundation of not harming, no matter what we do during the course of the day, because we don't have that motivation, there is no guarantee of whatever we do will be of any benefit, maybe besides ourselves. So she was very, there was just like this whole retreat, she has a very, very direct tone dealing with this group, because we all came in incredibly enthusiastic, very outraged by what was going on in the politics. There were some local things happening that everybody was up in arms about. So making this our first thought when we wake up is a huge part of caring for ourselves and caring for the larger world, for the things that are being addressed right now and that we really want to engage in and respond to in a way that's going to be of help. And so then she goes on and she says, well, let's think. We think of non-harm. Well, we're people that don't harm. We're good. We care about the hungry. We care about the poor. We care about the marginalized. We care about that the political process is fair and inclusive. And she said, and we care also about, she says, there's this rather non-specific, magnanimous care for those that don't impact us directly. The polar bears and the wolves and the people in Syria and the hungry of the world, which we really need to put in our purview or in our perspective. But she said, starting with not harming is what's in front of us. You know, we would horrified at the thought of killing another human being. But thinking about what is the kind of harm when it comes to those creatures and those other living things that live around us. I mean, where do we draw the line on not harming? Because she wanted to get our minds the big perspective, which was what we were so concerned about, but bringing it in and saying, if we're going to really benefit the world, we've got to start with what are we doing right in front of us? When there's a rat, when there's a mouse, when there's bats in the attic, when there's fleas on the dog, when there's ticks on the dog, or there's ticks on people, what do we do? You know, how far does our not harming go? Is it only out there, out in the sort of vague, hungry world, or is it closer in to the beings that we come in contact all the time? And that, and at that point in the beginning of the retreat, she said, just to be aware of this. She wasn't going to say, do this is what we need to do, and this is how. She was going to unfold that later on. But this was one of those beginnings of the retreat where she's doing a reality check with us. Where are each of us in regards to this deep wish to not harm and to benefit? And how does that play itself out? And what are our margins? And where do we set that margin of non-harm in our world as far as our body and our actions go? And then she said, okay, let's continue with non-harm. And what about our speech? I mean, how difficult has it been, particularly this year, not to have harmful speech with what's going on in the world, what's going on with the elections? Not only just hearing, I mean, first of all, hearing all the fractious exchanges, hearing the exaggerations, hearing the untruths, hearing the underestimating of what is true and what is not true. But she says, once again, we're looking out and looking at all the not quite true statements, the divisive statements, the harsh speech out there, which we really want to have something to say about and to really support changing that kind of interactions. But she says, then bring it back home, bring it back into your own experience with our very strong, I mean, on one level, what she's trying to point out is that we all want harmony, we all want tolerance, we all want the ability for ourselves and others to be able to state our views, and to be able to have freedom of speech, to be able to put it out there. But at one point, how do our biases and judgments about those that disagree with us start to influence what we say, how we say it, and to whom we say it? So once again, she's bringing the back. We're going to think about other people's harmful speech in line, but first we really have to come to how do we harm others with our own speech? By our views, by our judgments, by our biases, by seeing others who disagree with us as enemies. And you know, within the context of having a bunch of activists in the space in front of her, that's the kind of the format that she was going into. And I think in my very, the way that I experience the people in my life and the people at the monastic gathering were all very much spiritual activists. You know, we really want to help to benefit the world, but we also realize that it's got to start from this side. It's got to start from within ourselves. So she started the retreat like that, and I wanted to start the sharing of these very powerful teachings that she gave in regards to how do we address the challenging times, cultivate a joyous heart, And how do we transform our minds? How do we use these challenging times to feed our Bodhi resolve rather than separating, disconnecting, and abandoning our Bodhi resolve instead? So over the next few times that I share, I'll journey into the transcripts and pull out some of the very succinct points that she has on how to work with our minds and during these times that are so challenging for many of us. So we'll see what the rest of the transcripts bring in the days to come.